Hey, joining me now, Ned Ryun, founder and CEO of American Majority Inc. He had a op-ed the other day. I wanted to get him on. He's been busy, called "The Left's Politicization of the Coronavirus Backfires Bigly." Great title, by the way, Ned, and he's joining us now. And I mean, these people will weaponize anything that comes their way. You actually had commentators, Ned, on MSNBC and CNN calling it the Trump virus. I mean, as if the president had anything to do with this. I mean, these people are nuts.
They are nuts. And John, I mean, I think the thing it's clear, you're right. They're politicizing this. Russian collusion didn't work. Ukrainian quid pro quo didn't work. Impeachment didn't work. They are literally looking for anything and everything to try and hurt and damage Trump going into the 2020 elections. And I have to tell you, I mean, it is wildly irresponsible what some of these media figures are doing in whipping up this frenzy, trying to drive down the markets, trying to undermine Trump. And so, I was thinking about, and I wrote this piece in which I had started to discuss, I don't think coronavirus is the big one, right? I mean, it's not going to come anywhere near what the Spanish influenza did turn of the 20th century. But I think what it has done, it has really highlighted for us, John, a couple significant weaknesses. So the piece that you're looking at in red, I'm doing a follow-up piece in the next couple days in which I've said coronavirus, Chinese coronavirus, the Wuhan virus, has highlighted two major weaknesses. One, immigration. Ask yourself, if we have a major pandemic that could potentially kill millions of people, do you think that our porous southern borders would actually protect the American people? I will shorthand it and say, not even close. The second thing, and I refer to it in this piece that you just referenced, we are in a significant problem with the barbaric communist Chinese regime in regards to our antibiotic and drug production. 97% of our antibiotics are coming from China. 80% of the materials used to produce drugs domestically are coming from China. And then to make matters even worse, most of the generic drugs that our military are using are coming from China as well. If nothing else, coronavirus has shown we have a real problem with the manufacturing of antibiotics and drugs, and I think Trump needs to take advantage of this situation and say, for national security reasons, we need to onshore this production immediately.
Wow, Ned. You know what? For 20 years, I heard the globalist from Goldman Sachs telling me that manufacturing didn't matter if it was in the U.S. or not, that it was all about finding ways to lower the cost of production, that labor was cheaper in the Asian markets, that it didn't matter, that just keep doing this and you're going to save 5 cents on your 6-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Life will be good. You can go to Walmart. You're going to save a dime. That's what the globalists told us, Ned, for 20 years, right? Let the jobs go. Remember Obama said, can't wave a magic wand. The labor's too cheap. We have to pay too much money here. You're all going to be Walmart greeters or whatever they were attempting to do. You'll have to find new jobs, become, semi-robots, go to McDonald's, whatever. Now, all of a sudden, here it is, right? Now they're telling us, oh, wait a minute. We have to bring our supply chain back. These are the same people who shipped it there, Ned.
So there are a couple different angles, John. You're absolutely right. The corporatists have sold us out. This is one of the end results of globalization. One of the other points I'm going to be making in this new piece is this. This is also the end result of the administrative state. We have seen the administrative state abuse the surveillance state. Law enforcement use it as a political weapon against Donald Trump. We also have to understand that the massive regulatory burden of the administrative state has also brought this upon us. And let me explain quickly. Our last factory that produced penicillin shut down in 2004 because of the regulatory burden, while at the same time being undercut by the communist Chinese, who in the early 1980s had actually put a lot of money into the production penicillin fermenters to actually make a run at the antibiotic market. And so our regulatory state, along with the corporatists, help offshore the production of antibiotics and drugs as the Chinese were making a significant move to try and corner the market, which they have succeeded in doing. And so I think what Donald Trump needs to say is, okay, we are going to onshore this. As we started this whole conversation about China and the trade war, over steel, and it would be insane for any superpower to let its steel industry be undercut for national security reasons. In the same way, Donald Trump needs to start making this argument. It is insane for any country to allow the offshore production of antibiotics and drugs, which, oh, by the way, John, about 50% of the American people every day are on some form of antibiotic or drug, which would, if the Chinese decided to weaponize this, the devastation that it would cause and the disruption that it would cause to not millions of Americans, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans, and, oh, by the way, grind our healthcare system to a stop.
Ned, how did this happen?
Because we were asleep at the wheel, because our leaders lied to us, because they actually believed the siren song of globalism that somehow letting China into the WTO, they would come in, they would want to be a liberal democracy, everybody would be at peace, they would want to be a capitalist free entrepreneur market, they would want to actually be a ally in with other countries around the world. We would all hit nirvana. We would live at peace forever. That is completely untrue. It is a falsehood. And so now I think we are confronting, we listened to the wrong people. Our leaders sold us out. They listened to the globalists. We've allowed the administrative state to actually have such a regulatory burden that it has offshored this. We need to have a conversation, and this is what Donald Trump's second term has to be about, how he breaks apart the administrative state, how he communicates to the American people. I truly believe this, John. I believe that the coronavirus, not the big one, it is a warning to us that we have to fix our immigration policy, that we have to fix our manufacturing, especially with antibiotics and drugs. This is what Donald Trump needs to do in his second term and say, because the American people's self-interest is at stake here, I am going to solve this problem in my second term, and we are going to break apart the administrative state, and by all means laid out for me as the executive and the commander-in-chief, I am going to secure the southern border.
I'll tell you what, Ned, you're the first one I've talked to that has targeted the administrative state. All of us are focusing on Wall Street, the big players, the financial houses that were behind shipping these jobs out in their never-ending scouring the globe. Ned Ryun, founder, CEO, American Majority, had a great op-ed the other day. Must read, says, the left's politicization of coronavirus backfires bigly. I love the title. Ned, bigly. We're talking about the administrative state. I don't focus on that a lot. I'm always blasting Wall Street and Goldman Sachs and the big banks and the banksters around that shipped our jobs overseas in their pursuit of slave labor. Tell us again, though, what you want to do is you want to take a hammer to the administrative state, which you're fingering as part of the reason our drug manufacturing went to China. Why? How?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I wrote in my book, Restoring Our Republic, first chapter, in which I lay out that progressives put this administrative state in place about 100 years ago. And what it has done, of course, it's antithetical to our founding. It is not what the founders intended. And I've made this argument, John, the only way we can restore the American Republic is to destroy and break apart the administrative state. We have to break it apart for so many different reasons. Again, as I alluded to earlier, you know, these administrative state actors think they're the ones that decide. They abuse the surveillance state. They abuse law enforcement to target Donald Trump and his associates because of, you know, policy disagreements. That was it. Now, in regards to the regulatory state, this is one of the things where Donald Trump needs to go in, and I've made this argument, in a responsible way, because we want clean drugs, right? We want the antibiotics. We want the drugs to be done here correctly and in as clean a way as possible. He has to think about how he can lower the regulations as responsibly as possible, give tax breaks and incentives to bring it back home for national security reasons. I think he can make an extremely compelling argument. But, John, part of the thing that I've said about the administrative state is this. This is one of Donald Trump's priorities in the second term, and I've even told this to him to his face. Sir, you want to drain the swamp. The only way you drain the swamp is to break apart the administrative state. It is the very foundation. And when I say administrative state, John, I mean this. There are over 430 departments, agencies, and sub-agencies in D.C. alone. There are about 2 million federal government employees, of which 800,000 are considered non-essential. And so part of the argument I've made to the president is this. there are departments, like the Department of Energy, that should be absolutely broken apart into Interior Commerce and DOD, literally get everybody out of there, blow the building up, start shutting down departments, agencies, and sub-agencies, take those 800,000 people and start putting them into the private sector, which, oh, by the way, his policies have actually created 6 to 7 million jobs in the private sector. This is an opportunity and a moment to say we have to change the numbers. And I keep on saying this. I'll say it again, John. We are playing the game by the rules laid out by the progressives. If we do not change the rules, we will never win the game. The way you win the game is to break apart the state, shut down departments, migrate these people out, change the numbers, give us a chance to win the game. And so when I say administrative state, regulation, surveillance state, law enforcement, when it becomes so powerful that it thinks it's the one that decides, you've got a problem. And we have allowed it to get to that point. Break the state.
Can he do that without, he would need congressional approval to do that?
So inside the executive branch, Donald Trump is going to have the ability through various executive orders for the short term. Obviously, executive orders only last until the next administration, and if for some reason, God forbid, Democrats win the White House back after Trump, these executive orders would only last for 4 years, right? Mm-hmm. So in the short term, he has the ability to take a swing at, take a chunk out of these things, but you're right, you're correct. To make it long term, he is going to need allies in the House and the Senate, means the Republicans have to have the House back, keep the Senate, and then have bold leadership that will say, we will work with you, Donald Trump, to actually do this and to, in a responsible way, break apart the state, farm it out. I've even also made the argument, John, take some of these departments that should still be around and put them in Montana, put them in North Dakota, put them as far away from Washington, D.C. to break apart the Leviathan and put it out in the real world so that, you know, first of all, you're breaking apart the Leviathan. You're also going to then help people migrate back into the private sector because they're going to say, I'm not moving from Washington, D.C. to North Dakota to keep this job. I'm going into the private sector. So there's a variety of things I think he can do in that 4-year period, but you're absolutely correct. Congress is going to have to step up, and we need a conservative majority in the House and the Senate to do that.
Well, he could only have 2 years to do that. If he can win again, which I think the president is going to get reelected, Ned. I know we talked about this the other day. I think he's going to win again, and I think he's going to take the House with him. So that leaves 2 years because we know a lot of these swing districts are just going to swing back again when the backlash comes and the pink hats, instead of having 1 million-person protest, they'll have 3.5 million. I mean, it's all coming if he wins again. So he's got a 2-year period. And, he spent the first 2 years of his administration, dealing with the Paul Ryans of the world and got nothing done, and actually had backfired the healthcare thing. Everything Ryun did, they didn't want him. But now he's cleaning house. So, Ned, it could be the most dramatic 2 years since FDR.
Well, and I'll remind people, John, he's already putting things in place right now. Right now in March of 2020, where he has completely, thank God, restaffed, cleaned out presidential personnel, put more America First people in to actually run it. So making better personnel policy, personnel decisions to send people into these various departments to actually promote and push the president's agenda. So that's a good step. But I've also encouraged him, the way that you're going to do this is you have to set the groundwork now. Through the rest of 2020, put in place a plan, talk to your various secretaries and say, in January of 2021, I want you all to have a plan on how you're going to reduce by 33%. I've said this to him. I put it in a little memo to him. 33% each one of your departments over the next 2 years. And so by January of 2022, you're going to put that plan into place and begin the process by which you actually break it apart, send people into the private sector, send departments out into the real world. So he starts it now, John. If he's going to maximize those first 2 years, and I'm optimistic if we can do some of the right things that you could actually keep the House in the 2022 elections. But you're right, 2-year window for sure. You got to begin the process now, lay the groundwork to make those 2 years for sure one of the most epic, monumental 2 years in generations.
I think that's it right there. I want to thank you, Ned, for being with us. I mean, great column. I look forward to the next one coming out. Ned Ryun, founder and CEO, American Majority. Fabulous segment. Thanks for making the time for us. Go to AmericanMajority.org. That's AmericanMajority.org.